Hey everybody, Jeff here. Welcome to today's narration of the article, Why Loving Yourself as a Prerequisite for Loving Others is False. My wife convinced me to use a more palatable word here. This was not the original title of the article, but it's what I settled for. So here it is. We often hear the catchy phrase that you can't love others until you love yourself, as if the prerequisite for anything interrelational is understanding oneself first. But the problem with this is that it assumes that everybody is self-aware enough to truly know themselves and courageous enough to face their fears and their insecurities before undergoing personal change. And I don't know about you, but facing personal fears has been some of the hardest and most terrifying work I've ever done. Far scarier than sneaking into any kind of Al-Qaeda stronghold or bomb facilitator's house as a SEAL. We are all our own worst critics, which is where this premise of first loving oneself before others comes from. And it makes sense on the surface because how we feel about ourselves is oftentimes projected onto others. So for example, someone who's overly critical of others is probably just as, if not more, critical of themselves. And if you find yourself judging others harshly, then chances are you judge yourself the same. Or if you were raised to see vulnerability as a weakness, for example, then you might avoid acknowledging uncomfortable emotions, which really means that seeing such emotions in others might trigger negative feelings in you, perhaps even a trauma response. So it seems logical from this perspective that by changing the affect that we have for others, we can change that which we hold for other people. That by changing the affect that we have for ourselves, that we can change that which we hold for others. So in other words, we can treat others better as a result of treating ourselves better. I call bullshit. This is a very linear path, and here's why. This me before you thinking, it makes sense and it's catchy, but the one really big fallacy here is the notion that love is a one-way street, that I have to start with me in order to get to you. So what if, rather than starting that grueling uphill ascent of learning to love yourself before loving others, which is really a bullshit excuse, but we'll get to that in a second, you instead practiced giving love. You instead were loving through your existing relationships, using compassion, using curiosity, active listening. What happens then? By being loving toward others, we learn to love. The cause effect here is how being leads to doing, not the other way around. But more on that in another article. A little too deep for that right now. Anyway, we don't love ourselves first as a prerequisite to love others because loving is a vehicle for love. Loving is a vehicle for love. I want to repeat that because it's what we employ to learn how to love ourselves and others. But it's certainly a convenient excuse to say, well, I need to love others, or I need to love myself first before I get into any relationships, because telling yourself keeps you safe, right? It avoids further attachment that might be harmful. But the truth is, loving others unearths hidden vulnerabilities and exposes those inner wounds to the outside world, which in turn invites the opportunity for healing so you can love. Sure, they may be uncomfortable because that's not what you're used to thus far, but that's how you become comfortable.